Okay, it's 6 o'clock, September 16th, 2013, and it's time to call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the San Felipe Del Rio CISD. Mr. Overfelt, there's a quorum, correct?
Yes, sir.
Let the record show that a quorum of the board members is present, that this meeting's been duly called, and that notice of this meeting's been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. At this time, if you'd stand for opening ceremonies. First, a moment of silence to reflect in your own way. And now the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. We'll take a look at the agenda. That brings us to item 7, since there's nothing on the items before that. Agenda item 7 is reports. A being information on notice of grant awards for Carl Perkins Basic Grant. Mr. Gonzalez, CTE Director, is presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. This, before you, you have the information on the notice for the NOGA on the Carl Perkins, which is actually the CTE educational grant in the amount of $124,122 for this school year.
Questions for Mr. Gonzalez?
I have one. How does that compare to previous years?
This is actually a reduction of $17,649, and this is actually based on the sequestration. And again, this amount of $141,000 from last year, the decrease, we're hoping that in the spring there is an actually reallocation of funds based on the way the formula is set up by TA and of course, Carl Perkins. But it is a reduction.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next report the board will hear is 7B, information on delinquent tax collections from Linebarger, Gogan, Blair, and Sampson LLP. Ms. Sonia Gonzalez is presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, Dr. Rios. On behalf of Linebarger, we are pleased to present our yearly collections report. I know it's quite lengthy, so I'm going to try and summarize it as best as I can. We had a total mailing activity of over 8,500 letters that went out on accounts that were delinquent, a little over $7.2 million. In addition, we had target mailing of 980 letters that focused on about $2.9 million. 4,500 outbound calls that resulted in a little over 2,500 inbound calls and correspondence. We continue to work with the tax office and the taxpayers on getting them on payment arrangements, so forth and so on, to avoid foreclosure or legal proceedings. We did set 107 cases for trial this year that we went to court on, and in addition, we are continuing our walk and talk campaigns. We have staff that come in, they'll visit businesses, they'll visit with taxpayers, as well as notice of seizure letters that are sent specifically to businesses, just to speed up, to either get them in the door to make a payment or get on a payment arrangement. And at this time, my colleague, partner Ronald Rocha, is going to close up with a brief summary on our sales. Thank you.
Thank you. To piggyback on Sonia's walk and talk, before I came here, I did visit a car dealership that is delinquent in 4 years of some back taxes. I did visit with him, dropped off a notice of intent to seize his business. He assured me he was going to be going both to the county to pay the city and all the taxes due by this Friday. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I did warn him, if we didn't have anything or any type of payment contracts by Friday, we're gonna be filing a warrant to seize the business personal property. And a lot of that was his inventory of the vehicles that he is selling. We're gonna keep an eye on that this week. Also, on the binder, I'm gonna go over that real quick. The tax sales, we've had total so far 2 tax sales. This year also, last month, first Tuesday of the month, we had a resale. What that is those properties that go to tax sale, there are no bids and no bidders for the property. They get struck off to be held in trust by all the taxing authorities. We put these on our website to try to resell these because basically they become tax exempt. We try to get them back on the tax roll, but a lot of times the minimum bid amount and what the value is, and there are also some city code compliance liens are higher than what the value of the property is. So what we did on a lot of these properties, we had over 26 properties that we set for resale as a public auction. We went to before the city and the county to lower the minimum bid amounts under the tax statute. What we did was cut them in half. And we also asked the city to go ahead and release a lot of the code compliance liens, the demolition liens and the weed liens, which they did also. A lot of these had houses that were destroyed at one point by a lot of the flooding in previous years, so that was taken out. So these properties were set for resale at first Tuesday of the month. Out of those 26, 9 properties were sold and put it back on the tax roll. Now, what we have left got struck off back to the taxing authorities. We've had interested buyers who at the time of the sale, were interested in some of the properties, but for the amount, they weren't still sure. But we've gotten emails now where they're gonna send in a lesser bid. And for the lesser bid, basically we go back to the city and the county and get approval for that lesser amount. But the main goal is, we're not making any revenue right now, it's put it back on the tax roll, and in the future, the revenue start coming in by when they start building the property and refurbishing the property, the value will go up, and then the revenue will start coming in. On page 38 is the collection results. If you look over the past 6 years, it's been gradually, tremendously going up. Our highest was last year at 1.6 million. We haven't finished out the year, we're at 1.3 million. We're about less than 300,000. We've been getting a lot of fees coming in. We should either equal that or surpass that by the end of this August, or when we get the report for the end of this August collections. Are there any questions you may have regarding the report, or any collections, or walk and talks, or resales, or tax sales? I also have a binder. I'm gonna clean it up, and I'll leave a binder here. If anyone's interested in the resale properties, it's been mapped already, the locations, the current values, what the minimum bid, the lower minimum bid will be if they had liens and they've been released. I need to just take out the ones that were sold and just clean it up. It's also on our website at www.publicans.com, and that can be pulled up also and viewed by anybody in the county or outside the county who are interested in buying some properties.
Questions? Dr. Keys?
Real quick, what's the collection tax rate?
I'm sorry?
What's our collection tax rate, percentage-wise?
That would be last month, about 96 to 98%.
Wow.
I'm not sure, again, this was about 2 months ago, I got it, and then we've got extra months coming, so I'm not sure.
That's very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Mesa?
My question also deals with what Dr. Keys asked, but I know initially, we were told that the collection rate would be 98%, but that includes previous, I guess, collections that are pending. In other words, we do come up to 98, but not current year.
Right now, the current year, we just got turned over in July. So we have in July, August, September, we're only 3 months into the current year. What we'll do is go back and look at it within the year, and we'll show probably around 98% for this current year. It'll be the 2013s. We just got them turned over July of this year, July 1st. So right now, we were at probably 97, 98%. So we got another 6 months for the current year. That should come up a little higher, but I don't have, again, this was back in June or July when I got that information from the county.
I think Ms. Valdez has something.
Good evening. Mr. Bessa, as of the August 31st report, our current year collections were at 94.86% and total 99.94%.
But that includes delinquent.
That includes prior year.
Previous
But
years.
current year is 94.86.
And we just got those in July. So those are 3 months of collections for the July, for those years.
And I guess my question relates to, I know, when we initially, well, back then, many years ago, I guess we were promised a collection rate of 98%. My understanding was for that current year, which, 98 comes around, but it's actually from a combination of current and delinquent taxes from previous years.
Well, then we're at 99.8%,
In total,
right?
in total for this year,
99.94%.
99.8.
The current year,
Current
ended
year's at
the year,
94, but we just got those this July. So usually when we look at we look at a year to see when you reach that 98%. So we're just 3 months into collecting the current amounts.
right. Do you understand my question? I misunderstood 98% meaning current year collections.
So what we'll do is, at this time next year, we'll look at the 2013s only and see what the currents are. So right now, July 1st, we got turned over the 2013s, which are your delinquent amounts. We're 3 months in at 94%. So when we go through the year, we'll see if we reach the 98% you're referring to.
Right, but I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying at the end of the year, it was 94% of the current taxes.
That's correct, sir. 94.86% of current year's tax
Current.
levy and current year collections.
And see, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay, you're referring to the ones we do not collect
Right.
prior to July 1st.
Right.
By statute, we can't touch, by law, we cannot go over the currents until July 1st, when they become delinquent and get turned over to us. So those amounts, by law, we cannot go after until July 1st, when they become delinquent and get turned over to us.
If I may share, from 2011, 2012, and 2013, our current year has been increasing every year. Our 2011 percentage was 92.93, our 2012 was 94.05, and our 2013 is 94.86, so it has been increasing.
And that's what, I would hope that, the current year collection goes up, because I had a misunderstanding that it was 98% this current year. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
Not-
as of July
not-
1st, the 2013, we're at 98%.
Yes. Not from a combination of years past.
So those are just the non-delinquent accounts prior to it being turned over to
Correct,
us.
yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm glad, Yanakani, that you have those figures again. That helps out a whole lot. Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Chavita?
First of all, let me thank you for all the work. I notice a lot of research and everything that you guys do. And, but after all you do, there still seems to be some problems occurring.
Okay.
And looking through the trial settings up here, there's things that were out, set aside for sale, whatever that means. And some errors that occurred and some, due to notices and whatnot. And I know I used to be with some years back, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was with with some of the tax with the
Appraisal district. Appraisal.
appraisal district. And it seemed like, I don't know whose fault it is as to how we come to have all these errors that people talk about, and, of course, we had never experienced it. But I noticed that in some of the ones, of course, ours, we only had maybe 2 or 3 for the school district and 1 and the majority of them were for the county. But how does it go when, let's say, we exchange a property, and where does it go? You go to the abstract company, and then, what's the procedure? Can you tell me?
Well, a lot of the problems you're seeing right now is not current. They're double assessments. These happen, I'll give you an example, the Waterloo area that was sold in the 1900s. Deeds were filed, and it is along the way, people just kind of fenced them in with no actual transactions. When we go back and do the research, we find some deeds from the 1900s, but at the same time, other deeds were filed, for that same property at some point. One account was left open and was not considered what it's called killed, and they created a new account. So we got two accounts with the same property. And then someone adds acreage to it, so that account becomes larger. So when we go back and, basically when we start cleaning up the old stuff, we start pulling up these old deeds, that's when we start coming across these double assessments.
Yeah.
And it's not current stuff that's coming on, this is older stuff, from the old, way back in the day when,
But it was never
a
done.
lot of this was handshake stuff back then. But to answer your question regarding, once a property, you go through a title company, they get the title, they file it with the county clerk. The county clerk records the information, and then that information is sent to the appraisal district. The appraisal district then updates the information based upon the date it was recorded with the county clerk. And that's how that information is updated on the appraisal district. The appraisal district then sends that information over to the taxing authorities, and it's through a supplement to update the software, the different, the true automation software, to update both tax offices, to update the addresses or ownership change. Now, a lot of times there's address issues that come up, is again, it's the responsibility of the taxpayer to go to the appraisal district and fill out the form of a change of address. A lot of times when we do a mailing, they'll come back bad address, we'll do the research, find the new address, mail the delinquent notice, but again, the taxpayer says, well, I never got notice. Well, it's the taxpayer's responsibility if they do move or change an address to go and make that change. So a lot of times there's those issues like that, but again, it's the responsibility of the taxpayer to make those changes. When we do find them and you send them a letter, we inform them, you need to go to the appraisal district. You need to make that specific request to the appraisal district, fill out the proper form to make that change, to get your tax notices. So again, under the tax code, failure not to receive a tax notice is not a defense to not paying your taxes. As a property owner, that individual should be aware every year that there's delinquent taxes.
See that.
Again, even the appraisal records, if your appraisal does not change your value or the value goes down, you're not gonna receive an appraisal notice. Only if the value goes up, will you receive a notice from the appraisal district to protest your valuation. So, I mean, again, any changes to be made are made at the appraisal district, and it's the responsibility of the homeowners to make that change. And it's a lot of times the responsibility of the title companies, or if you're doing a transaction between two parties, to make sure that document, even a contracted deed document, which is like, I'm gonna sell it to you in the future, it has to be filed with the county clerk to make sure everything's updated, to make it known to the world that they have an interest in this particular property.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I knew where we were as far as all those transactions. Because with technology now, we shouldn't be making those errors. But I can see many years back and continue to be as such, and it is not until the sale comes up that those problems do
A lot of this
arise.
is older things that their deeds were filed or not filed, or there was lawsuits filed in district clerk regarding a change of a title, but it was never filed and moved over to the county clerk where it would have been updated. And that's where sometimes back then it never occurred.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brings us to agenda item 7C, report about Project Lead the Way, Gateway to Technology changes. Mr. Casillas, Mr. Gonzalez, and Ida Gomez presenting.
Good evening again, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. Project Lead the Way has announced changes to the implementation of Gateway to Technology, GTT program for middle schools. These changes are made in accordance with new guidelines issued by the Texas Education Agency and Project Lead the Way, and will be effective starting this school year, 2013-2014. Project Lead the Way is a leading provider of rigorous and innovative science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM educational curricular programs used in middle and high schools across the U.S. Project Lead the Way curriculum is founded in the fundamentals, problem solving, and critical thinking skills taught in traditional CTE, but at the same time integrates national and technical learning standards and STEM principles. We have 3 courses that are actually being taught at the middle school: Gateway to Technology 1, which is actually design, modeling, and automation at 8th grade, and Gateway to Technology 2, which actually is applied science and technology also 8th grade. And Gateway to Technology 3, Energy, Environment, and Flight. Again, this is at the 7th grade. The credits that you see on the side actually are for high school elective credit. So the students that are actually enrolled in these classes will be getting again, after they finish their 8th year, or middle school year, up to 1.5 high school elective credits. And again, we have the principal, Ada Gomez, and John Reed here to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions? Mr. Mesa?
Mr. Gonzalez, I was reading through the information here, and the teachers are required to receive training
That's correct.
instead of teaching.
This CTE program actually sends all our teachers over during the summer and to train, and Mr. Reed can give you some more information on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Mesa.
So, I mean, I understand the CTE, so it's pretty much like in the summer going off to get
2
your
weeks
requirement.
at UT Tyler. I spent my 3rd summer at UT Tyler. I'm becoming very familiar with their dorm, and it's a very rigorous program. Most trainings have been 5 o'clock, you're done. 4 a.m., you're done with the projects and the amount of work you do, so.
Good.
And it's very close tied to the robotics program. I mean, the design and modeling, the automation robotics is all, I mean, hands-on with the STEM, so.
Right. I was reading through that, and it seems to be very rigorous, which I'm glad that you're including that environmental part, which is, you know, again, wonderful for them to learn solar and thermal and wind and so forth. Thank you very much.
Ms. Lozano has a question.
How many students will we be able to accommodate in these?
Project Lead the Way has a contract with the board. It's supposed to be 20 students per class. Right now, I have 24 computers, and 7th grade, I have a huge influx. 8th grade, we have a total of close to 40. So it's a good program.
Per class?
No,
Oh,
total,
Okay.
2 sections.
that's a lot.
Don't want to be
And
that exact.
is this a program that the student has to enter in at the 7th grade level?
No, they do not.
At any time?
They don't scaffle off of each other. Students that didn't know about me in 7th grade, they can jump in 8th grade. That's usually how it works. Most of the kids find out about the program. They're like, we didn't know about it, or the parents didn't know about it, and they want to get in.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda item 7D, Chamber of Commerce Del Rio Economic Development Task Force Sports Complex Project off Kingsway Boulevard. Dr. Rios and Mr. Salinas presenting.
Mr. Garabedian, members of the board. Over the last couple of months, we've been invited by the Economic Development Task Force to participate in studying the possibility of having a recreational facility. And we haven't committed any district resources, but we have been part of the discussion. And just for clarity, and in case y'all hear something or read about it in the paper, we wanted to make sure that we kept y'all advised. So Mr. Salinas has 3 or 4 slides that we'll go through, and if there's any questions, we'll entertain them. The property that's up there, it's right in front of the current softball field at Buena Vista Park of
Kingsway?
Kingsway?
Yeah. Here's the swimming pool, here are the tennis courts.
Yes, behind church. The city has passed a resolution to dedicate that to an athletic complex facility. Can you go to the next slide, Mr. Salinas? That's the tentative plan that the city has said. It's got a Babe Ruth-sized baseball field and some soccer courts and football and a lot of parking. And that's the amount of money they've come up with. We haven't committed any district resources or indicated any in-kind contributions as of yet. Mr. Salinas will work with our athletic director, Coach Hurley, to see what benefit the athletic complex would be to our students. And at that point, when we've ascertained those benefits, if we ascertain those benefits, we'll come back to the board and ask that you approve an MOU, much like you did with the baseball field, the Bank and Trust baseball field. That's where we're at right now. Mr. Salas, feel free to add any details that you see necessary. But our main point was to share with y'all that we are part of those discussions, but nothing formal has been set in place. Go ahead, Mr. Salas.
This area right here that has a representation of some fields is the area that includes about 12 acres that the city is currently surveying. The rest of the area does not necessarily belong to the city just yet, but there is a commitment on someone in the community to actually turn it over to the city and or the county. So the area that's outlined in red will be the final amount of property if everything goes through.
Can you go back to that picture again? Where's Kingsway at again? The
Right
road?
here. This is the road right here. Kingsway, here's the swimming pool, that's the
Okay.
tennis courts, and that's that
So
baseball.
it's behind the swimming pool, right?
It's actually behind the church across the street.
It's the,
Oh,
Here's the church right here.
LDS church that's right across from.
Okay, so it's on the west side.
Yeah, there's kind of like a little driveway
Okay.
there off to the side.
I couldn't see the swimming pool.
Right.
Yeah, and so they don't have this piece of property here just yet. That would be the entrance once they acquire that. And part of this out here is owned, I believe, by the county, and then the city is trying to secure the rest of this piece right here. They do definitely own this 12 acres. It's right here, this section there. And that's what's being surveyed right now.
So what was the dollar amount? I couldn't see that number. They made it too small.
Well, and I'd like to clarify this. This right here is very preliminary. It includes material only to do a Little League baseball field, a Babe Ruth field, and a second Babe Ruth, and clear out an area for soccer and football field, and put in a sprinkler system and fence in at least the Little League baseball field and the two Babe Ruth fields. It does not include any labor. The county is, I believe, going to be looking at providing some of that, along with the city.
Ms. Haynes has a
Is it a
question.
flood zone? the water seems
We've been told that it's not in the flood zone per se, but it is part of the drainage off of Kingsway area. So it will get wet, and so obviously they're gonna be very careful when they clear some of this property here to turn them into fields and develop, this type of concept, that it's the parking areas that are in the areas that might get wet, or the fields, but not the concession area that might be here in the center part along with restrooms.
Now, you said these are Babe Ruth fields?
Well, the concept here has one big Babe Ruth. This one says Babe Ruth, but here on this schematic design is showing two Little League baseball
Are
fields.
these practice fields or actual?
Well, they would be both. I mean, this concept here is to actually turn it into a sports facility, and what we're talking about right now here is basically practice fields at this point, to clear the land and fence it
If
in.
they're looking for an official baseball, I mean, it makes no sense. Why did we invest so much at the Bank and Trust field then? I thought that was part of the agreement with them. To play the Babe Ruth games there also.
Yes, but there, obviously, there's always room for additional use in the community, and that's what the city and the county are looking at.
And do you know, Mr. Salinas, is what you're showing us, I assume that's like the first phase, is, it seems like an awful lot of properties. Are going to be other things? I'm wondering, like volleyball, for example?
Well, they haven't spoken about that, and that's why, this is all very preliminary, you know, as far as our participation in it so far. But this is kind of crowded here. It doesn't show, the parking, it doesn't show the soccer fields per se, it doesn't show the basketball court here, or the tennis courts where they're gonna go. And this, again, is preliminary. This is a design that they pulled out of their records from many years ago
Okay.
of,
So this is just
developing a
kind of give some
concept.
visualization and could
Yes.
change.
What this is doing here is if the county and the city wanted to move forward tomorrow, this area is almost pretty cleared out. And the city public works director, Mr. Canales, laid these out on that property. But it, again, just to show that some fields would fit but it may not necessarily be in line with the concept here.
Dr.
Well, and as Dr. Rios did say, we need more input about where does the school fit in? Because you've been talking about county, city, but I can't see anything from the school where that fits in.
And if I could, what I wanted to clarify, and one of the reasons it was important to bring this to y'all and share it, is that the city and the county may move ahead, but we've indicated to them that they're welcome to move ahead because they actually have elected officials at the table. So they can move ahead and start working on it, but we won't become part of the project until we've fully vetted out the benefit to our students and brought it to the board. But because we are at the table discussing with them and participating in coming up with these figures, we wanted to make sure that we kept y'all informed. The city and the county have indicated an eagerness to move forward and start clearing fields and putting up some preliminary fences and at least start using them as practice fields. But we wanted to make sure that we were clear with the board that we have not committed any resources, if it clearly indicated what needs to happen before we can participate. But since our name will be out there with everybody else, we wanted to make sure that we kept y'all informed.
Mr. Chavita has a question.
Dr. Rios, in reference to what you said, what benefit will the district get in reference to what, like, for example?
So for example, if we wanted to have a soccer tournament, that would definitely be a field that we could possibly use, or a baseball tournament. You would need multiple fields if you wanted to include more teams, or just additional practice facilities that may become necessary if one team was playing and the other team needed to practice. But we have to clearly establish those benefits.
Yeah, but I would see it too from another angle, is that the kids, every kid that will play on those fields is our kids. And they will get, number one, get involved so they won't get busy doing something else. Health-wise, they can keep them in shape, etc. So, nowadays, businesses, when they come into town, they're not only looking for schools, but they're looking for recreation for our kids. They're looking for libraries, they're looking for all those things. So we would create a lot of good things, a lot of benefit for our district. But it's great. Another thing, Mr. Salinas, if it's something that was done sometime in the past, that's just a very small portion, because the one that was submitted some years back, like in 1996, between 96 and 2000, it included what you're talking about. For adults, it had volleyball courts, sand, and of course, the space is kind of limited, so maybe we can look into it too.
And that's why the city is trying to acquire additional land there.
And maybe further down this way.
Yes, sir.
Well, the attractive offer for our school district is if we expand the aquatics, in case there's interest from our kids for swimming teams or things like that. A natatorium or something. But that will really get, I believe, our attention if the kids really want that.
That's good.
Any other questions for this report?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to agenda item 8, consent agenda. Number of items on there. Does any board member wish to pull any items from the consent agenda for discussion? It's on page. There does need to be an edit on one of the minutes, if you could make a note of that before we proceed. It's on the August 29th, 2013 minutes. I caught it at the last moment. It's on page 24, Ms. Falcone. where it says, it's towards the middle of the page, where it says Charles Garabedian stated that the board had an opportunity to speak to the district's attorney and all questions had been answered. So he called for a motion. That's the only thing I noticed. Okay, so there was no one wanting to pull
Yes,
anything?
I
Ms.
do.
Lozano?
I want to pull, what letter is that? H2.
Okay, Ms. Lozano is requesting to pull item H2, which is H is second reading and adoption of policy revisions, and 2 is consideration to approve the second reading of revisions to FNF local. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Then what I'm gonna do, that one's been pulled. We'll go ahead and, in a moment, I'll ask for a motion and a second for everything else. We'll pass it, then we'll discuss that one and see where we go. Okay, so with that said, is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda except for what's been pulled? Mr. Overfelt has motioned, I second. All in favor by a show of hands? It's unanimous, motion carried. So that brings us to consent agenda item H2. Second reading and adoption of policy revisions, consideration to approve the second reading of revisions to FNF local.
I just have a couple of questions, Dr. Rios. And I was speaking to Mr. Salinas about them a little bit ago. And I think it's just wording, and I don't know why I missed this before. But on page 2 of 6, the mandatory drug testing program, the way it's worded is a little confusing. And I didn't want parents especially to be confused about the wording that says the district requires drug testing of any student who participates, blah, 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 or requests a permit to park a vehicle. Requires, it almost seems like everybody's gonna be drug tested. Now, I can see that it's going to be a random drug testing. So that just kind of misled me.
Yeah, I can definitely see where that would cost people, and we can certainly,
Just add like may random, whatever, or something. It makes, because I thought, well, that would be pretty expensive for the school district to pay for all of the drug testing.
except that on page 3, where it talks about scope,
Scope?
on page 3 of 6,
Uh-huh.
it does say that students shall be randomly tested throughout the year. So obviously, I understand that you have to keep reading the policy for it to be fully clear, but we do indicate that it would be a random drug testing on the top of page 3.
Right, I did see that. But the word mandatory and requires comes before the scope.
Yes, ma'am.
Would it suffice if we added random at that point? Mrs. Lozano, the district
I
requires
just think it
random?
might help to clarify. Because the expectation is that we're gonna come back and have to do mandatory testing on every single child who participates or parks in one of our parking lots, and that'd be pretty expensive.
We can input the word, indicate that we'll input the word random now, and you can still vote on it. Is that,
That's
I think
correct.
that'll really clarify it.
Yeah,
with
that edit.
we'll edit with that edit,
Thank you.
absolutely.
That was it?
Anything else on that item before we move forward? Okay, so, there has been the edit, as Dr. Rios understands it, you're okay with?
Yes, that's
how he's
fine.
edited?
Thank
Okay.
you.
So is there a motion to approve consent agenda item H2? Ms. Lozano has motion, Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? It's unanimous, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 9, citizens to be heard. Ms. Falcone, anyone register? Okay, no one to speak to us at this time. Moving on to agenda item 10, administration, first being A. Consideration to approve the district and campus performance objectives according to policy BQ legal and BQ local. Dr. Rios is presenting.
Yes, Mr. Garabedian, members of the board, I believe that in previous years, this school board has approved
I think there might be a question. Do y'all have a question about something?
Okay, maybe look at the one, but we're not gonna do the quarterly report?
That, that was under consent, wasn't it? Yeah, that's I, under consent.
Okay, okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Sorry.
in previous years, the school board has approved the district improvement plan and the campus improvement plan, and as part of those plans has approved the campus and district performance objectives. The policy BQ legal and BQ local indicates that the board should approve the campus performance objectives and the district performance objectives, and that then those should drive the improvement plans. I think, well, I know that the logic behind it is that it would be unreasonable to expect that the board or any other government agency read in detail all of those improvement plans. However, understanding the performance objectives clearly drives the plans and are more understandable. That's what policy requires. What we intend to do, if approved tonight, have the campus performance objectives, which I've included, and I'm going to ask in a minute the chief instructional officers to come and present them, at least present a sample of them, one from each level, is to have those guide not only the development of the plans, but also guide the reports that we will share with y'all quarterly on the progress that the campuses are making towards achieving those performance objectives. Those performance objectives, both campus and district, would also help provide insight into the superintendent's evaluation, which is an item that we discussed later on under, also under administration. So if it's okay, Mr. Garabedian, I'd like to ask Dr. Garza to come to the podium and review a sample of the performance objectives.
Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, and members of the board, good evening. I am going to present the campus improvement, campus performance objectives from freshman campus. And just for your information, there is information in the TA website where we extracted this information to be put in the CPOs. It's public record. They're called Student Achievement Calculation Reports. That's where we extracted the information. We have Index 1. That's another thing. We divided it up by indexes, which is the state accountability now. We have Index 1, which represent the student achievement. At the real freshman campus, we have four areas that we're going to pay attention to next year. It's going to be the English, Algebra 1, and Biology. That 71 for the English reading was once again extracted from the calculation tables that are in the TA website. So I just went down the line. All those numbers were extracted from there. English writing was 50%, Algebra 1 was 81%, and Biology was 84%. The other item that we have here for Index 1 is attendance. The attendance at the end of the year for the freshman campus was 96.2. And if you look at the years in sequential order, in 2014 through 2018, what we try to do is figure out a percentage that needed an increase. And since we have three distinct areas, which goes all the way to 2018, we wanted to make sure that we would do increments in three different scenarios or sections. For example, in 2013, they scored 71%. In 2014, it went up to 77%. And the way I did that, we got the 90, minus 71, divided it by 3, and then it came up to about, well, that's 6 percentage points. In 2014 and 2015, it stayed the same because the percentage is going to be a different standard the following year, which is going to be 2015. Originally, the standard was going to go up in 2014, but the commissioner has left it the same. The standard is going to be the same for 2014. That's why we have to have an increase for that year. And then in 2016, once again, 2016 and 2017, we have an increase, but it also stays the same because we want to make sure that we give the campuses enough time to achieve the next standard, because it's going to increase the following year. Eventually, in 2018, we want to go all the way up to 90%. So there's every year we want to go up as much as we can in order to achieve the 90%. Then in Index 2, this is the student progress. Also, once again, I extracted this information from the calculation tables that are in the TEA website. Here I can explain the first one, the reading. It's all students. They scored 59%. And once again, the sequential order goes all the way to 2018. But then what we wanted to do, we wanted to also identify the exceed progress in reading. For example, for all students, they scored 5%. Now, exceeds progress doesn't mean exceeds expectations, which is a little bit different than exceeds progress is a little bit different than level 3. So it's a little bit different. It's not exactly exceeds expectations. Then in Hispanic is 57%. And once again, I wanted to identify the percentage for exceeds progress, which is 4%. In white, it's 76%. Exceeds progress, 5%. Special ed, 21%. And special ed exceeds progress is 0%. And then you can see the math and you can see the writing. It's the same calculation for those two areas. And then Index 3, closing the achievement gap. Once again, it's reading, math, writing, and science, because those are the courses that are going to be evaluated at freshman campus. This is where I was getting, I hope I didn't get you confused, but economic disadvantage is 69%. Economic disadvantage at level 3. In order for them to succeed, they need to score at level 2. This one is, we wanted to calculate where they were at level 3. So in reading, it's 7%. Hispanic is 74%. Hispanic level 3 is 10%. And white is 69%. And white level 3 is 17%. Then it's the same thing for the next core areas, for math, writing, and science. And once again, the sequential order is still there from 2014 all the way to 2018. The last index, at the freshman campus, they don't have the actual graduation rate, but we want to see where they're at in post-secondary readiness. This is also extracted from the level 3 information. And as you can see there, for all, reading is 10%, for Hispanic is 10, white is 17, special ed is 5, economic disadvantage is 6, and ELL is 0. Once again, it goes in sequence all the way to 2018. So, and I'm going to show you one more slide, even though it doesn't reflect back to the freshman campus, but this is the only slide that the high school has, which is index for post-secondary readiness for graduation. The high school is the only one that's going to have that. Once again, this information was extracted from the TEA website. As you can see there, the 4-year completion rate is 92.3. The recommended and advanced high school graduation plan is 71.3. And once again, it goes in sequential order all the way to 2018. Any questions?
Mr. Mesa?
Mr. Garza, going back to like freshmen, I was looking at those percentages, and you know, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, we're setting low expectations. You know, to me, I'm thinking eventually we're going to reach the target. Not next year, but eventually we're going to reach the target. And I think it needs to be above and beyond that, because some of these scores are low to begin with. And it's almost, we're telling our teachers, it's okay, just take it slow. Well, I think there's a sense of urgency, because I think, you know it, and I know it, that, you know, TA is gonna change eventually. I mean, everybody's expected to be at 90+ percentage points. Otherwise, you're gonna get called on it, because, you know, the rating system is changed, is gonna be A, B, C, D, F. And it's coming next year.
Just-
Yeah.
If I could, Mr. Garbine, take writing, for example, it is at a low 50%. And we would love to score higher than 63%. But when we look at what growth is statistically significant, it's not about what's necessarily attainable, but it's what is statistically significant, because we have to remember a couple things, Mr. Mesa. I, as a superintendent, am saying, I want to be held accountable for growth. I want to be held accountable for growth that is statistically significant. In other words, that matters. But also that even though it requires a lot of work, it's also achievable. If we look at the scores in writing across the state, from the last year, or the previous year to last year, there was no growth across the state. So to say that we're gonna grow 13 percentage points, does put a tremendous responsibility, not only on, Mr. Limon and his teaching staff, but also on, Dr. Yarza and his CNI staff. So we would love to score higher, but I wanna be held accountable for growth. But I want to be held accountable for realistic growth. And I think that setting an achievement of 90% over the next 5 years, in other words, I'm saying, as a coach would do, give me 5 years and I'll turn this program around. Well, I'm saying I'm going to turn it around every year moving forward. And the end goal is to be 90%. Now, that was the whole reasoning behind it. This is the way that I've developed performance objectives in the past. If y'all want us to go back to the drawing board and we can come to a workshop and talk about it. But looking at the growth over the state over the last couple of years, where there was no growth, indicating working towards 90% in 5 years, I think it's very real. But I'd be more than happy to collaborate further with the board, and if that's what y'all want to do, I'm okay with it. I just know that I'm telling you, you can hold me accountable to getting to 90% in 5 years.
Can I also say something, Dr. Rios?
Sure. I mean, I'm sorry. That's
Board's
Mr.
meeting, yes, you may.
I'm sorry, can I say something, Mr. Garabedian?
Go ahead.
I understand your concern, Mr. Mesa, but just as an example, with those scores right there, 71, 50, 81, and 84%, the level that the school needs to meet at index 1 is 50. There is a number that the state requires us to meet in index 1. It's 50. This campus did a 71. So they're 21% of points above 50. So if we think of it in a logical way, and if I can get those scores to 77, 63, 84, and 86, it's only logical that that 71 in index 1 is going to increase. This is not necessarily the final number for table 1 index. It's just the percentage that they scored on each specific test. But I guarantee you that if we go up those many points, that 71 is going to go up. That 71 will probably go up to 75, 78%. I am confident that it will.
Right.
So it's a little bit different than the state accountability was before.
I understand. I think, in my perspective, I've spoken to a lot of kids that have graduated, have gone off to college, and their main concern was English and writing. They're saying, I struggled that first year when I had to write everything from, let's say somebody goes to law school, they struggle, and that's an area that's been, known for every graduate to come back and say, my weakness was in writing, and it was in the English area. I wish I would have gotten above and beyond that, because they struggled. And, it's realistic. I think if any of us were to go and question those students that are currently in college, they'll come back and tell you pretty much the same thing. And that's where I'm coming from, that something needs to happen to bring, that percentage way up higher. Because the reality is, these kids, when they're graduated from San Felipe Del Rio CISD, they struggle at the university level in those areas.
And I understand that, Mr. Mesa, and you said the word that I want to use myself, we need to be realistic. And I feel that if we go from 50% to 70%, that's not going to be realistic. So what we want to do is we want to achieve the next level. And we want to spread it out, just like Dr. Rio said, so that we can get that index number to be higher than 71%. I really like this state accountability now, because not one group is going to get us in trouble. What our goal is to get all groups to go up one more time to get that 71 to be higher. Because let's not lose focus that index 1 is not just going to be measured by English writing. It's going to be measured by all of them. And that 71 is going to go higher if we can get those numbers to be increased. And you're right. It's got to be realistic.
Ms. Lozano has a question.
I too agree with Mr. Mesa. 50%, which is where we're at, correct?
50% for writing, yes.
Correct.
For all
And we
students.
want to be at 63%.
Right.
I mean, when you're looking at 100%, that does seem low. However, I would think it would be extremely difficult in 1 year to turn it around from 50 to the 70, 75. It's going to take time. However, my question is, if you can go back and explain again, why does it stay the same for the most part for 2 years at a time?
If you look at the table that's right below it, if you look at where it says phase in 1, phase in 2, and phase in 3,
Right.
phase in 1 is at 54%. That means you have to get 30 out of 56. Now, actually, for writing, it's 40 out of 62. Okay, that is not going to change. You still have to get 40 out of 62 the next year. Now, the following year, according to that table, it goes up to 43 out of 62 questions. So if you look at the number of kids that would have gotten 3 more questions correct, it really is a huge amount of students that have to perform higher to pass. So because the test gets harder to pass, we leave the standard the same, because kids are going to improve already across the board just to get the same passing standard. Did I explain that part well?
Yes, kind of,
So
sort of.
the other piece I wanted to mention is that if you look at index 3, for example, can you flip Dr. Arce to index 3? If you look at writing again, we also are sharing with the board that we want to hold, and this really answers Mr. Mesa's question, we have 0% of our economically disadvantaged students that performed at a level 3. So what I'm sharing with the board tonight is not only do I want you to hold me accountable for just increasing the number of students that are passing, I also want you to hold me accountable for the number of students that are scoring at a level 3. So if going from 50 to 63% doesn't seem as enough work, I'm also indicating that our goal is to go from 0 to 12% of students performing at a level 3, which is the level 3 is what y'all used to refer to, or we used to refer to as commended performance. So I just want to be clear that it's not just index 1. We're just not committing to getting more students to pass. We're committing also to getting the students that have passed and getting them to pass at higher levels. And that's real work, Mr. Mesa. I know that. Well, I think you know that probably better than most of us.
Well, and if I could respond, when I looked, I think both of us looked at a certain curriculum, let's say from San Antonio, and I said 6 years ahead, because their lessons are so structured that they don't skip one beat. If a teacher's out for whatever reason, sports, training, that person that's coming in has got every objective that is supposed to be, taught for that day. And the curriculum is so well arranged and the resources, and we're far away from doing that. I'm concerned.
We're getting a little off track. Curriculum versus objectives.
Well, do you know what I'm talking about, right?
And I'm gonna address that in one of the agenda items towards the end, sir.
It was concerning math, for example. But I think the arrangement, what I'm saying is, we're needing to do something above and beyond what we've done in the past. And as I mentioned, the realistic part of this is that when our kids graduate, they struggle in that area. And so something needs to be done above and beyond that small percentage.
I was gonna ask if there was a question from this side of the table, but apparently it's about the temperature in the room.
That's very important, sir.
Yes, it is. Other questions before we, Mr. Chavita?
Dr. Rios and Dr. Garcia, I think I'm for being realistic about what we do. It's almost impossible to be at a position and the jump way up here. Realistically, we put a lot of burden not only on the teachers but on the students, just like anything else. You continue to lose or not obtaining that goal. Pretty soon you're going to forget why you're there trying to reach that goal. You got to be able to have something in increments so that you can get there, so that you can have some success and be able to get there. I, for one, would like to see 100% on everything next year, but it's impossible. So I think this goal is realistic. I think it's going to take us some time. I know we're doing a heck of a lot. And the reason I'm saying this is because the one thing that we need to do is on attendance, we don't have a whole lot of people to help us out. And maybe we ought to look into it, because if our students are not there, they're not going to learn. And those kids that are staying behind or not attending school are the ones that are going to bring our scores down. So we need to do something about it, and provide our principals something to work with. There's other places that they have, yes, like the high school, they have an attendance officer. But that attendance, or on a district-wide, we should make people aware that they better get their students. If we want to see improvements, they better get every single student to attend school, to be able to be up to par with everybody, because they miss a day and it's going to take some doings to get on it. So if we can do something to help our district, maybe through technology, advice, continuous bombard them to say, hey, people, hey, you shouldn't be taking your kid to the store or to the doctor. They ought to make appointments during the summer instead of that type of thing. Just making people aware that it's important for them to be in school, so that they themselves will say, hey, I can't, because I've heard a lot of teachers say, hey, I better get all my kids, a lot of parents, get my kids to the dentist to get their shots, etc., so that they won't miss school, so that I won't have to take them. Those are the things that we need to make sure that we as a district help we as a district, the main office up here, help our principals to make people aware of our attendance. And I think the rest of the things will take on. I remember they were asking me to choose some books as to, what makes you a more successful person. And I chose attitude, because the rest will take care of itself. So if we get our students to be in school, the rest of it will take care of itself. So again, thank you, Doctor. I think this is a good thing.
We have,
And not to say that I don't agree with Mr. Mesa. I think, but we need to be realistic about what changes we need to make.
we have information from the elementary
Yes, sir.
instructional officer. Can we see that?
Good afternoon, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. We also want to share the CPOs for elementary. And we're going to use Chavita as an example. Okay, so as Dr. Garza mentioned, the index one is the one that indicates the percentage of students passing, and the state required that the campuses had to be at 50% or higher. So for reading, Chavita Elementary had 79%, math 80%, writing 68%, and science 74%. And as you can see on the student performance standards, like Dr. Rios mentioned, these standards are going to go up every year. So this is why we have, for example, here, for the reading, 83% and 83%, because then when we go into phase two, the standards are gonna be higher. So we wanna have that time to work with the students and the teachers to be able to meet that target. Okay, then student, index two. This one, it goes ahead and shows the progress, and each campus gets 1 percentage point for students that meet progress and 2% for students that exceed progress. So here we show for reading, all students met 59%. All exceed progress students, 15%. Hispanic, 59%. Hispanic exceeded progress, 15%. And math, all students, 39%. All students exceeded progress, 12%. Hispanic, 38%, and Hispanic exceeded progress, 13%. And on closing performance gap, this one, we go ahead and look at the percentage of students in performance gap groups passing the state standard. So for reading, level 2, the economically disadvantaged, 79%. For math, economically disadvantaged, 81%. And here's also the Hispanic. And here we have the level 3, that's the advanced, and that was at 18%. So here we want to try to increase it so that our target would be the 35%. For math, the two groups, we have the economically disadvantaged at 81%, and we're comparing it against the Hispanic for 80%. For the writing, the economically disadvantaged, it's at 66%. And then we're comparing it with the Hispanic for 69%. And then finally, the science, the economically disadvantaged at 77%, comparing it to the Hispanic at 79%. And for Index 4, like Dr. Garza mentioned earlier, that's only for high school that the state rates it, but we want to go ahead and challenge our students because we know that college readiness is very important. So even though we're not rated in this index as the district, we want to go ahead and look at the students that were at advanced so that we can see that there's growth throughout the years. So for example, here on the reading math, we're at 19%. So in the 5 years, we want to go up to 35%, which would be our goal. And then we do that for every population. And what, I'm sorry?
How come some of them decrease? I mean, we surely don't want to decrease.
No, it
Like
shouldn't.
looking at, I don't know what AA is under math level 3. You are at 38% and you want to be at 35% in 5 years?
Okay, right here. Oops. I
Show
should
me
have
again the
done that.
specific cell you're looking at now.
Huh?
Okay, because the AA, that would be the African American, right? And we go to 38,
Well, in 2013 was 38,
and then it
and then in
goes
5
down.
years, you want to be at 35%?
There must be a problem with that cell, but it should increase within the 5 years.
Yes, it's just that all those were set at a maximum of 35%, but when your previous year is at 38%, unfortunately, the cell rule overrode it and left it at 35, but we'll definitely make that adjustment.
Regression to the mean there.
Yes, sir.
questions?
Any questions from this side of the table? Dr. Rios, you have something to add?
Well, the only clarification I wanted to make for the board, because at one area we talk about exceeding progress, and another area we talk about level 3 performance. And I just wanted to clarify for the board that the level 3 performance is the new commended performance. The exceeds progress is the state's new way of calculating student growth from one year to the next. So that a student can fail, and it can fail the next year again, but they still indicated growth. Exceeds progress means that they exceeded more than 1 year's growth, which means that we went above and beyond adding the value to the student's learning that we would otherwise be expecting. So exceeds progress just means that the kid learned more than would have been expected of a normal child during 1 year. That was it.
Okay. Anything else? I think the board, all of us, in both speaking and listening, did a very thorough job on this item. And, you know, I have pretty much no pastimes, so I spend all my time reading board minutes and looking at videos and all that going back many, many years, and I don't think I've seen a discussion this in-depth, this focused about student achievement, about tracking student achievement, about where we want to go, even throwing in curriculum and instructional aspects. So, it's good. Do you have a specific recommendation you want to read, or do you want me to ask for a motion to approve?
Yeah, I can read the recommendation.
If you would.
Administration recommends that the school board approve the district and campus performance objectives as presented.
Further recommendation, I so move to accept. Is there a second? Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? It's unanimous. Motion carries. That brings us to agenda item 10B, which is consideration to approve superintendent performance goals. Myself and Dr. Rios presenting. I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of set the stage and refresh everyone's memory. And this is at the heart of being held accountable, because this is a major component for what will be Dr. Rios' evaluation based on his job performance in less than a year's time. If you remember, approximately a month ago, I brought before the board for consideration, it was approved, a calendar, which is our roadmap to stay on track with all of this. And in September, we talked about, and on that calendar, to either in a workshop or perhaps in a regular meeting format, to review and adopt superintendent performance goals. This is the second time in a 2-year period that we've done this. Now, these are not district goals. These are performance goals, and they flow logically from the larger district goals. And Dr. Rios put them in our packet for his presentation and for discussion. They do fit neatly with the TASB guidelines. I think everyone had their TASB booklet. What page? It's right after you get through all those tables. When you're through all the tables. Remember, it was about this time last year that we introduced the TASB booklet about developing performance goals to get further down the path of accomplishments. And kind of in a nutshell, that those goals be, according to the SMART criteria, specific, measurable, attainable, and these meet those criteria. They will become a part of his evaluation, or they will become a part of the evaluation instrument. We're not talking about the instrument yet. We're talking about a major component of the instrument, just to make that clear. And it is according to board policy, if I think most of you know, that his evaluation is based on performance goals, as well as the job description. Dr. Rios, you want to walk us through the goals you've set out?
Yes, Mr. Garabini, members of the board. Under the first performance goal, under District Goal 1, Superintendent Performance Goal, it indicates that by May of 2014, I will ensure that the district personnel implement sound instructional practice conducive to the attainment of the campus performance objectives and the district performance objectives. There's a lot more that follows, but the performance objectives, both for the campuses and the districts, play a big role in this first bulleted item here, because it gives the board a vehicle by which to measure the growth, the academic progress of the students, but it also gives the administration a vehicle by which to measure the effectiveness of the campuses and to take action as necessary. So it's an accountability program for the district, both for my evaluation, but also for the evaluation of the campuses. It holds all of us accountable. The next one just ensures that we have support systems in place by professional development. And the third one, that we use instructional technology in order to support the growth that we want to provide and the learning experiences that we want to provide for our students. Mr. Garbino, are there any questions about the first set of performance goals?
Any questions or how these link to the tables that he presented and we approved prior? Okay. And you'll also notice that clearly there is the focus without question on teaching and learning, on curriculum instruction. We are, after all, an educational organization, and that is at the center now of what we're doing, what he's doing. Okay, next.
District Goal 2, which speaks to the community's resources, financial, human, and our facilities, it speaks to transparency, that I implement the budget that y'all have approved in a manner that's transparent and conducive to providing for the immediate and long-term needs of our district. So transparency is a big part in that first bullet item, that we use the personnel in a manner that is also conducive, but that we also provide for the developments, provide for the certifications, the classroom effectiveness, and adequate compensation. And the third bullet is that I address the facilities needs of the district, which we'll also address later on in the meeting today. And that we continue to review the facilities need during each budget cycle, and that we make necessary contributions to that growth. Is there any questions for the second set?
I
Ms.
just
Lozano?
have a quick question. Why the rush on the third bullet? It just seems really quick. Not that it's not needed, I'm just.
I think that, well, I know that in visiting with the administration, we want to establish the Citizens Committee and move on that process so that we don't fall behind. It doesn't mean that we're going to allocate any specific money to any project. I would never do that. The board does that. But I definitely want to also hold my administrative team accountable for moving us in that direction.
And I can see what you mean, Ms. Lozano, because October, I mean, we're already September the 16th, it's 2 weeks, right? But think about it, when I'm sitting here thinking, okay, if there is a committee, say, by the end of October, then you're facing the holidays and everything else, and that committee has to coordinate schedules, so I think that's, when you think it like that, it makes more sense.
I mean, that's not gonna give you much time.
Right.
If you're giving yourself a deadline by January 2014 to prepare a facility improvement plan, does that give you enough time?
I think I'm giving Mr. Salinas plenty of time.
Okay. I get it, thank you.
Accountability does reach out into the audience as well.
I want to be clear. This holds me accountable, but it also gives me a vehicle to hold all of the district's administrators, all the way from my cabinet level to my assistant principals to the curriculum department, accountable for all jumping on the bandwagon and working towards the betterment of the district.
And Dr. Rios, you will give us a lesson as to support all these bullets here, right?
And it's not a new concept either. I think it's something that Mr. Salinas has been working on off and on for some time.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And the third district goal speaks to communication. The district shall provide meaningful and effective communication in a timely manner to parents, students, staff, and district partners. What we intend to do is to continue to implement the protocols really that we've already established for providing the weekly updates with the board member, and establish protocols for communicating with district personnel, including the weekly updates and communication as necessary. In the months to come, we will share with y'all how we intend to increase the communication with the community. The board already knows that since I've come on board, I've shared with y'all the weekly updates and try to respond to questions that come up with the board. For example, there was a question in relation to some of the policies that were approved today in the previous weekly communiques. I've provided the information that's required, and that's certainly something I want to be held accountable for continuing to do. I share my weekly blog that I share with the faculty on a weekly basis to communicate to them the direction of the district and to celebrate some students' accomplishments. And the next thing that we'll seek to do is bring to you a plan to communicating with the wider community at a minimum on a quarterly basis.
Thank you. Now, we did bring these during the regular meeting because we've done that before. It's pretty comfortable to do that. I want to make it clear that this is not the instrument. The instrument is something that will come very soon. We need to commit on doing that, preferably this month. I know people's schedules are difficult, but that would be put together after these goals are approved, if they're approved, because they're one of the most significant components of the instrument.
Just want to make, I don't want the point missed because the performance objectives that y'all approved a little while ago definitely provide a vehicle to measure a lot of what we've laid out here. And I just want everybody to appreciate the depth of those performance objectives, because while I agree that we would want to see our campuses, up in the mid-80s right away, I want everyone to consider that not only are we talking about the passing rate, but we're talking about improving kids' performances at all levels. And we know that to take a student who is performing at an average level, which means that he or she is passing, and bring them up to a commended performance is work. So we're not just sitting on our laurels and saying we're going to get students just to barely pass. We're going to get students that are already passing and moving them to the next level. So we want to be held accountable for growth at all levels. And in reviewing, I guess, just past experiences in other districts, I just don't know of too many administrators that have put themselves out there and said, no, not only do I want to be held accountable, but I'm providing a vehicle by which to be held accountable. And I just want to make sure that that's clear and that type of transparency isn't lost after we move here today, or move from here today.
So I think at this point we understand clearly how the performance objectives discussed earlier are the next level that link into these performance goals, right? We're going from district to performance to objectives. Other comments? This side of the board has been very quiet tonight. Okay, if there's no discussion, then I so move to approve the 2013-14 superintendent's performance goals as presented. Is there a second? Ms. Lozano has second. All in favor, by a show of hands? It's unanimous, motion carries. Can someone help me with this? You knew it was going to be you, right, Dr. Garza? I just want to show the board something to give you a better idea of where we're going next with this process in the very near future. This is still germane to the topic that we just discussed. Is it my imagination, or has this screen gotten closer to me?
It moved. Didn't it?
Cabinet member, Mr. Kirby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's harder to see from this angle.
Okay, the second one, Dr. Garza, and this is just for illustrative purposes. I just want the board to see kind of where this might be going, right? Now scroll down. This is a sample instrument from TASB, and it links, and I put them on there, right? The district goals, performance goals, and so on. Keep scrolling down. then, this is the other component. When we say board policy says performance goals, that's what we just approved, right? That's set in stone. He's known since May the 6th what his job description is, and he's been working on it. When we come back at a very soon date to finalize the instrument, it'll also involve these other components. By policy, it has to involve the other components, his job description components. It will also incorporate the commissioner's worksheet, which is on there, and that's where we get to some very specific data. So this is the next step. I think probably most likely Dr. Rios individually will ask people about their availability for a workshop, because something to put the rest of the pieces together is going to take a couple hours of us kind of hammering it out and typing in and taking out. Is this something that the board wants to try to fit in as a workshop between now and the end of this month? Or do we want to perhaps do it in early October, or maybe as part of the regular? I definitely don't encourage or suggest going much further. You need the instrument long before the actual evaluation, which will be in May, but I know our schedules are very difficult. I think at this point, Dr. Keys, you're tied up every night of the week, right, Monday through Thursday? And Mr. Overfeld? Tuesdays and Thursdays. I mean, I'm free 24/7, basically, you know, wherever and whenever. We have TASB coming up, right? That's, so.
Early October.
Right. Okay. Well, let's think on that, and individually, we'll talk with everyone, and we'll set a date. I think definitely a workshop, right? Sit here, comfortable, type up, and look at other evaluations, things like that. Okay. Any question on the vision of where this is going? But we have the goals. Goals have been approved. Yes?
I don't have a question, I just have a statement. This is not a tool that we haven't seen, although we definitely haven't seen it this clear and detailed. So thank you for working on that.
If you close that, Dr. Garza. And the rest of the file is, you know, we'll get to that point, the commissioner's worksheet and the other things. So we're right on track, basically. The goals were the biggest piece of the puzzle. You can close that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 10C, consideration to approve the formation of a citizen committee to discuss and recommend potential construction projects funded by the $25 million from dedicated fund balance. Dr. Rios is presenting.
Mr. Garabedian, members of the board, when you approved the budget for the current school year, you also set aside $25 million in construction, and I made it clear that we would not move on it until the board approved it or approved any construction projects. But I also indicated that I would ask for permission to form a citizens committee where we will present a whole array of district needs and have the community weigh in on the priority of those needs, because clearly the needs will exceed the 25 million. But before I bring some recommendations to the board to consider, I'd like for members of the community to weigh in on what those needs are. And I've mentioned before that we would talk about the needs of fine arts and a middle school magnet, CTE magnet, early college, high school, as well as the needs to house our elementary students, because in a little while we will present to you some information that will clearly indicate that we have some elementary schools that are overcrowding, and where we might have once thought that the population was going to grow south where Chavita is, the population has clearly gone north, and there's some needs there. So we will present these needs to the committee, have them help us prioritize the needs of the district, and then bring those to y'all in the presentation. The reason I'm confident that we can get this done, as was previously discussed in my performance goals, is because there had been some work done in that area. Mr. Salinas had worked with architects to start studying that. So we already have some information to present to a committee, and we will finalize it here in the next month. I just want your approval, and the way it will happen is that every program that we have in the district will have a representative. I can't have the committee get too big to where we're unproductive, but for example, CTE will have a representative, and that will be a parent. We're talking about all parents. A parent representative, a community member representative that CTE nominates, as well as the director of CTE, special ed, athletics, so it'll be the director of the program and a community member that they name, and then I would ask that the board individually also recommend one at-large person of your choosing to serve on this committee. You don't have to, but I would absolutely encourage you to name one person. So there again, it would be the directors of the programs, a community member that the director recommends to us, and then a member that each board member recommends. We sit with the committee once, twice a week, more if necessary, work through Saturdays, prioritize the needs of the district, and then bring a recommendation to y'all in January. And then we can begin the discussions as to how we want to move along in spending some or all of the money. But I think it's important to have that community input, and I think the board feels the same way.
Yes. Questions, discussion? Okay. Recommendation?
The administration recommends that the board approve the formation of a citizens committee to discuss and recommend potential construction projects funded by $25 million from the dedicated fund balance.
For the recommendation, I so move to accept. Is there a second? Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? Unanimous. Motion carries. Brings us to agenda item 11, curriculum and instruction. The first one being A, consideration to approve disposal of instructional materials that are no longer applicable for district implementation. Dr. Garza.
Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. We have been working with Follett. We have 12 pallets at the warehouse of instructional materials that are no longer applicable to our implementation in the district. These materials include things that book companies give us as demos, also a lot of tax materials, nothing that we can use at this point. So in working with Follett, they have three things that they can do with these materials. One is they can sell the materials to recoup for the shipping that they're going to be doing. The second thing, they can approve all the books that will be donated to a company that will donate it for books for Africa, and the company itself will ship these books to them. And the third one is any remaining books that are not shipped to Books for Africa will be recycled at the American Recycle in Atlanta, Georgia. Are there any questions?
A lot of books.
Any questions or discussion for Dr. Garza? For the recommendation?
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve Follett Education Service to collect and dispose of instructional materials that are no longer applicable for district implementation.
For the recommendation, is there a motion to accept? Mr. Chavita has motioned. Is there a second? Mr. Overfelt is second. All in favor by a show of hands? It's unanimous. Motion carries. Brings us to 11B, consideration to approve the submission of 2013-2014 request for maximum class size waiver exception to TEA. Aide Garcia presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, member of the board. Each school district is required to conduct a class size enrollment survey from kindergarten to grade 4. And our survey indicates that 23 classrooms have exceeded class size limit. We have Buena Vista with 13, Dr. Lonnie Green, 2, Dr. Fermin Calderon, 2, and Garfield Elementary with 6, for a total of 23 class waivers that will need to be submitted to TEA. Any questions?
Dr. Rios has something to clarify.
I just want, as I mentioned earlier, if we considered Buena Vista, that has the largest number of class size waivers, this summer, Mr. Salinas worked with the administration, with Ms. Salas at Buena Vista, to convert some classrooms or some rooms into classrooms. At this point, even if we wanted to hire more teachers, there is no room to add classrooms at Buena Vista. One of the directions that we've provided is that they no longer accept any transfers because the rooms are well above the limit, I'm sorry. We're too far gone. We can't help people as much as we'd like to continue to support our community by approving transfers. There is no room. There's no room even to put more teachers there. There again, that'll be something that the Citizens Committee will get to review and discuss and consider different solutions, including construction of a wing or the rezoning of our elementary campuses, because there are other campuses that don't have saturated space. Same thing at Garfield. Garfield is just a lot bigger. Obviously, it's built for that capacity, but being built for that capacity and actually having that number is a lot different and not as easy to manage.
This is a significant increase from last year, I believe.
Yes, it is.
It's a big indication also that something needs to happen on that end over here,
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
which, hopefully, everything from acquiring land to just long-term plans for the future. Because the development continues.
Yes, Mr. Mesa, and in talking with our staff, I know that I have a lot of hopes for different facilities in the district, but we've made it clear that the first thing that we have to discuss when we put the Citizens Committee is to meet these needs that are before us now. As I consider what's happened to the north, we can see that over the last few years, the development along what's termed the reservation and all the new construction north of Agarita, as far out to the lake as we can see, has really produced a lot of students. And now we have apartment complexes going up in this area also that'll further increase the need to serve students. So this will be one of the first items that we discuss with the Citizens Committee.
How many waivers were we doing prior to Eastside being shut down? What did that do to our numbers when we rolled that into North Heights and Lonnie Green and all of that? I know it shot them up, so were we already at this before we shut Eastside down? I mean, you eliminated an entire campus several years ago.
Dr. Rios?
I'd hate to call on any one of them to answer it, but I promise you that we'll look at it and provide it in the board update either at the end of this week or next week so that we can thoroughly research the number of waivers that have been applied for in the last few years, going all the way back to when Eastside was still a campus.
How likely, I don't even know if this is unrealistic or if parents would even be interested in doing so, but for this, for example, I mean, your kindergarten classes, there are 13 classes that are over the ratio, 22 to 1, but that totals 29 students. Are parents given consideration to saying, I want my child to be in a smaller class, can I move them to, I don't know, North Heights, or we don't want to open up that can of worms, which I just did. Sorry.
We've discussed it because in other experiences that I've had, rather than submit class waivers, we have transferred students. And it's always been the students that have come in on a transfer or that have been the last to register in the district. But that creates a lot of discomfort for parents because when we implement those practices, they don't have a choice. Now, what we can consider is offering the parents the option, but then we have to consider the transportation. Because the parents have to be willing to provide that transportation, or we have to consider financial implications for the district in terms of providing that. But we'll definitely, review that and bring a report, to the board. But as of right now, parents can't transfer, and those transfers, given space, so as long as it's below 22, will be approved, because that is our policy.
And are they aware of that option? I'm sure it's not something we like advertise, which we just start.
I don't know that they are, but we will certainly, for the classrooms that we're submitting a waiver for, we will definitely make sure that the parents in that classroom are aware of the options of where to transfer the students within the district.
Thank you.
So,
That's a lot of children. That one school.
And yeah, you can see, right, I mean, where the growth, it's obvious just based on that fact alone.
Do they get extra support, the teachers, do they get extra support for the extra children in their class? No.
No, but we did allocate, one paraprofessional to, both Garfield and Buena Vista. Dr. McNamara had 3 individuals that she was not able to place, from programs that closed, and those individuals were placed, one at Garfield and one at Buena Vista. Is that accurate, ma'am?
One at Buena Vista and one at Garfield.
I wanted to discuss that area, but, because I know that, you know, the library, for example. Well, okay, I know that, you know, principals are struggling with their schedules, and it's very difficult to kind of, you know, have an equal number of students throughout the different classes. And some of the areas that are really being taken the burden are like the library, for example. And they have a certain curriculum that they cover, and, you know, some principals have been very creative and, you know, have an even number per class, and some are somewhat, you know, way over. And I understand, like, you know, Buena Vista, for example, with, you know, seeing this number of students that you have, you know, waivers that are going to need to be sent in. But I still don't see how, let's say, for example, the librarian can get her curriculum, her instruction to these students when you have an excess number of classes. And I'm talking about 3 up to 4 classrooms at a time. I don't even know if the fire code permits that number of students in one facility all at once, but I don't think that extra person is going to be the answer. I think there needs to be a way to even out these numbers, because I guess my concern is, first of all, the librarian has to cover, you know, information to the students, you know, certain curriculum areas that she teaches. And it's difficult for me to envision 100 students in there, you know, with different age groups, different grade levels, and to being able to instruct those students with an additional person, you know, paraprofessional. I have no idea. The other part is there a certain capacity for that facility? Because as I see it, to conduct a fire drill with 100 kids under your responsibility is a whole lot. And it goes above and beyond that. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into details, but to me, you know, something needs to be done to even out that number. It's just impossible for a librarian to have 100+ students at one time.
Dr. Rios has a...
Mr. President, members of the board, last week we asked the principals, the elementary principals, to provide us a schedule of how they were operating the campus because of changes that we did have to make, and I'll discuss those in another agenda item. The principals created a schedule to get us by the week and be in compliance with other legal requirements. Now, 2 things. One, Ms. Garcia and myself, and other members of the CNI staff, we will review those plans. But we just asked for them last week and got them. We'll review those plans and make recommendations, and I think that you're not gonna find anybody that would disagree with you, Mr. Mesa, that having 100 kids in the library, and once we review the plan, if that in fact is the case, we will definitely improve upon that. The second part is that in terms of personnel, because of the situation that Buena Vista is in, and Garfield, the elementary chief instructional officer, Ms. Garcia, made some recommendations for personnel today. Now, we were not able to come to a resolution in the cabinet, but we did open those discussions, and will take action, appropriate action. We have started the process, so I think that if the staff at Buena Vista will be patient for another, 5 to 10 days, we will be able to provide necessary relief. Obviously, we can't do anything with large numbers unless parents choose to transfer out, but it's difficult for them to transfer. But we'll be able to provide some relief, and we've already started the process.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of, oh, sorry. Told me to go.
Is there anything else? Other questions?
Sorry. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submission of the 2013-2014 request for maximum class size waiver exception to TEA.
We've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Overfelt has motioned. Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. 11C, consideration to approve the memo of understanding for preventive dental services with the Department of State Health Services. Ida Garcia and Linda Guanajuato Webb is not here. Okay, Ms.
The Texas Department of State Health Services requesting permission to hold an oral evaluation clinic at Irene Cardwell Head Start Campus. The teams will be performing the Texas Basic Screening Survey. And this survey is just for data collection project that identifies the level of oral and dental disease in Texas preschool-aged children and provides valuable information concerning our children's oral health. The collected data is used on local, state, and national levels to educate policymakers and agency leaderships on current oral health needs. Any question?
We did this last year as
Yes.
well, right? I remember for some reason dental thing stuck in my head. So this is the same,
Yes, except last year I believe it was third grade,
right? Okay.
and this year it's just at the Irene campus.
Questions? No questions? Okay, the recommendation, please.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees authorize Dr. Carlos H. Rios, Superintendent of Schools, to sign the memorandum of understanding for preventive dental services with the Department of State Health Services at Irene C. Cardwell Head Start when presented.
For the recommendation, is there a motion to accept? Ms. Haynes has motioned. Is there a second? Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. Brings us to agenda item 12, facilities and operations. Consideration to award RFP number 14-04, Buena Vista Elementary Gymnasium Project. Mr. Salinas presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, members of the board, Dr. Rios. A little background, on June 17th of this year, the board approved the competitive sealed proposal method as the construction project delivery method for this project. And on July 15th, the board approved the design development phase and the associated scope of work and authorized us to move forward with the construction documents in the bidding phase. So prior to reviewing the bid tabulation sheet and the final recommendation, I'm going to turn it over to our architect to give you an overview of the project. David Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Salinas. Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board, it's good to be with you tonight. It's a pleasure to bring you a project that's on budget, on schedule, and to bring a bunch of rain clouds from Corpus Christi. It rained the entire way, so hopefully they'll hang around a little while. As Mr. Salinas indicated, the project was authorized to move forward in July, and in accordance with the established schedule, the project design was completed. The project was published in late August. And to briefly summarize the project, we have a couple of slides that we would like to share with you. The project itself, as you remember, is an 8,000 square foot gymnasium attached to the end of the classroom wing here. Additional parking is being provided here to supplement some of the parking that we're losing from the existing parking lot right there. A new play court will be constructed to supplement the play court that is lost from the parking. The connection of the gymnasium to the classroom is by an outdoor covered walkway with a handicapped ramp. The gymnasium at 8,000 square feet is virtually identical to the one our firm has just completed for you over at Lamar. There's one notable exception to that in the process of meeting with the principal and understanding the needs of this campus uniquely. It was determined that additional storage space would be a really, really desirable thing to do. So we studied the budget and looked to make sure we could do this within the allotted funds, and we believed we could. We put a mezzanine over the top of one end of this thing that would provide really necessary storage for this campus, and will be a good thing for the campus. The second slide.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Garabedian, if I may. I just wanted to remind us, can you go back to the previous slide? I just want to point out to the board that when we brought the project the first time, there was concern about displacing that front playground and creating parking, and we thought it wouldn't work, so we moved the parking to be accessible from the existing entrance and are now going to replace that court in that green patch that you see where it says play court. That was it, sir.
That is correct, yes, sir. That is correct. In meeting with the city as the project developed, the city has requested, and our office, and Mr. Salinas is continuing to work with them on this, has requested, actually required is a better word, a fire lane around this building to make sure that there's sufficient access around the building to fight a fire. We're working with the city right now to refine the requirements of that particular fire lane. We believe that anything they're asking for us to do, we can accomplish within allocated funds, but we're working with them right now to do that.
I want to clarify, those costs are not in the contractor amount. They would be in our final contract. It would come out of contingency or betterment allowance.
That is correct. On September 12th, this final slide reflects the proposals that were received for the project. 3 proposals were received, 2 from Del Rio contractors, 1 from a contractor out of Laredo. Frontera Construction of Del Rio, J.P. Sanchez Construction of Del Rio, and Vision Construction of Laredo. The base bid proposals, the lowest base bid received was $1,533,000 submitted by J.P. Sanchez, followed by Frontera at $1,595,500, and finally Vision $1,705,484,590. There's much more to these in the competitive seal process. You have to consider established criteria that we established with the staff and the board last summer. We took these proposals and applied the established criteria to them, ranked them. Our ranking is, I believe, included in your package. Our firm ranked J.P. Sanchez as the firm that presents the best value to the district for this specific project. Second would be ranked Frontera Construction, and third and last would be ranked Vision Construction. Again, it's a pleasure to bring a project that's on budget and on schedule at this point, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Salinas for any questions you all may have of him or anything else he'd like to add.
So in closing, the costs are on the cover of the agenda item I just provided you. The cost for the new 8,000 square foot gym, including approximately 1,000 square foot mezzanine, site development and utilities is the $1,533,000 that has been submitted by J.P. Sanchez Construction of Del Rio, Texas. We want to add the district's contingency or betterment in the amount of $113,700 that would cover any items such as the fire lane access, testing and professional fees of $153,300, which puts our project grand total at $1.8 million, which was the budget that we set for this project. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mesa?
Mr. Salinas, what would happen to that little area? It's almost like a canal that goes around the school to divert the water from the higher area back there?
Yeah, we've had, well, I'll let Mr. Brown answer that, but we've had a lot of topography done.
There is a small canal that runs through over to here, and there is a sump that catches water and spits it out. There will be some drainage modifications we're going to do. This is a difficult site, and as the board considers the growth at this site, that really needs to be taken into consideration because the site is just packed. We really had to wrestle to get this in. But we will be doing some contouring and some regrading around this edge of the gym to make sure that appropriate drainage is dealt with.
Okay, thanks.
That answers the question.
It's hard to envision, but, all that area back there is like 8 to 10 feet higher than the elevation of the school, and so that's the reason that it was diverted because of the runoff whenever it rains.
Yes, sir.
But, that canal was to divert the water and that's just the area of concern.
Yes, and that, the canal that you're referring to, or one of the canals that you're referring to is in this area that goes right through here, and that is going to be enlarged to make sure that we catch whatever water is there and continue to divert it away from the site.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions, Ms. Haynes?
Can I see the fire lane again? That's coming
From the side street right here, the entrance would be here. They want to be able to go all the way around and then actually exit. Our initial discussions with them was to build this area right here for them to be able to pull up to there. But those discussions were held with the city, and the fire marshal was not able to attend that meeting. So since he's reviewed it, he's asking to bring it into full compliance based on the 2006 code. And so that's why he's asking for this passageway here. He's not necessarily asking for it to be paved, but it has to be able to hold the weight of the fire truck. And so we're evaluating those costs in order to comply with their request of bringing it to the whole building to code for fire accessibility.
My other question is, I think all of us know the schedule because, it's difficult to construct during the year, when school is going on, but at the same time, completion is supposed to be done by the start of the following year.
July 1st, 2000.
So,
The specs read July 1st. We've left ourselves a little bit of window to take, for example, this was unknown. And if this adds some days, we can still get the project in before the start of school in August.
how is, I guess my question deals with, it's such a congested area with the traffic flow and the parking and everything. It's going to be difficult to, I guess, construction vehicles to be able to go in and out. It's
Require a lot of effort on everybody's part.
it's very busy.
We're going to hold the pre-construction meetings ASAP, Mr. Mesa, to iron out all those details.
The principal will be involved, and we'll invoke daily operations. This is, it looks difficult, and it is difficult, but it can be done, and we do it on a routine basis. And Mr. Sanchez has some experience in this regard as well.
I think the only plus that I see there is that fire lane that is kind of required from the street.
Yeah.
Might alleviate, because anywhere in the front, it's all congested.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? questions?
So July 1 is the targeted completion date, 14.
Yes, again, that's barring any delays on the contractor getting the permit, because we don't start counting the days towards substantial completion until that happens. And we've tried to preempt that by sharing the plans this time around with the city. They've done some preliminary reviews on that, and we hope that that will help speed the process for the sake of the contractor.
Anything else? No? Okay, I like the recommendation.
It's a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees authorize the administration to negotiate a contract with J.P. Sanchez Construction Company Incorporated of Del Rio, Texas, for the Buena Vista Elementary Gymnasium project in accordance with RFP number 14-04 in the amount not to exceed $1,646,700, and authorize the superintendent of schools to sign the contract.
For the recommendation, is there a motion to accept? Mr. Chavita has motioned. Is there a second? Is there a second? Mrs. Lozano has second. All in favor by a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1 opposed. Motion carries. Brings us to agenda item 13A. Consideration to approve 2013-14 budget amendment for ordinances committed from 2012-13. Ana Kanya Valdez presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, board members.
You sound very sick.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know you gave me the cold, though. This is in continuation to the August 29th approval of the committed funds. On August 29th, we had several ordinances that were requested for approval to commit from our fund balance. And the follow-up process is the one that I'm presenting tonight for those items to be approved at the functional level. On your page 61 memo, we have each of the functional categories that these committed ordinances would fall into place. And we have it for general fund and for food service. And on page 62, you will see the change from our approved August 23rd 13-14 original budget and the changes at each functional level. Do you have any questions? Don't make fun of me. I'm really trying.
Any questions from Ms. Valdez? Okay.
I have a copy if anybody wanted to see the ordinances that we had on the 29th.
Dr. Rios, you have something?
I just want to point out that Ms. Valdez was absent all day from work, but managed to get herself
Came back
for the board meeting, so we appreciate that, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, we have no questions for you, so the recommendation then?
Okay. The administration recommends approval of the items shown above with the budget increase of $3,703,460 with 66 cents for the general fund expenditure budget and 72,000 for the food service expenditure budget.
For the recommendation, I so move to accept. Is there a second? Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor, show of hands. It's unanimous. Motion carries. Next item is
Thank you.
13B, consideration of approved disposal of surplus furniture / personal property for the 2013-14 fiscal year. Ms. Johnson presenting.
Good Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, and board members. I'm here tonight for the consideration for you to approve the disposal of surplus furniture, personal property during the 2013-2014 school year. In compliance with Texas Education Code 11.151, the Board of Trustees may in any appropriate manner dispose of property that is no longer necessary. And in local policy, CI local, the superintendent may dispose of such property according to administrative discretion. Back in July, the board approved for the disposal of technology equipment, AV equipment, to be disposed of by Technology Exchange, and they have come and picked up this equipment, and it's working out beautifully. So all that we have now for surplus sales is used furniture. All of the furniture that I've given you the list of is furniture that has been offered to all the campuses and all the district offices, and this is furniture that nobody wants. Most of it is really not usable, like the file cabinets. The locks are not there, or they've been gouged open in order to get the drawers open because keys had been lost. None of the furniture is anything that you would want in any of the campuses or in any of your administrative or offices. And holding sales on a quarterly basis or on an as-needed basis also prevents us from having to find storage areas within the district to house this unwanted equipment. So it is with the, if you have any questions. It's the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the disposal of surplus furniture, personal property during the 2013-2014 fiscal year, either quarterly or on an as-needed basis.
For the recommendation, is there a motion to accept? Mr. Mesa has motioned. Is there a second? Ms. Haynes a second. All in favor by a show of hands. Unanimous. Motion carries.
And Mr. Garabedian and board members, Dr. Rios would like to address this subject as far as the listing that I gave you tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Rios?
Thanks for reminding us, Matt. I wanted to just inform the board that policy CI local already gives the superintendent the authority to dispose of the equipment. We bring it to the board really just for transparency, but the discussions that we had leading up to this were, do we take it to the board or do we just go with a policy? And I'll be asking board members to weigh in on it over the next few weeks, because I think that if the board has the expectation that we bring these lists for your approval, then policy should indicate that. Because as a new superintendent, if I would have based my actions on what we've done in other districts, then we wouldn't have brought it to the board, and we would have just disposed of it and given you a list on the update. But because of the previous practices, I didn't want to change that. But I think that just for clarity, either we follow the path where it's disposed of and we share it with you all in an update, or we change the policy to require the superintendent to bring this before you all so that there is no confusion. So I'll just be asking y'all over the next couple of weeks what you prefer. So if it is a desire that we change the policy, then we do that. And if it isn't, then we implement the actual policy that you have in place. That was it, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item 16, closed session. It's now 8:09 p.m., September 16th, 2013. The Board of Trustees will recess this open session and convene a closed meeting in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Subchapter D and E. We were able to do that under 551.071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.076, 551.082, 551.084. Specifically, tonight, do that under pursuant to 551.074, discussion of personnel. We're to hear complaints against personnel, first being discussion of personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements, resignations, and 2, discussion of salary adjustment to include the following justification: master's degree certification / licensure, and 3, discussion of approval of the principal at Lamar Elementary School. All final votes, actions, or decisions will be taken in open session. We're now in closed session. Okay, it's now 9:06 p.m., September 16, 2013. And the Board of Trustees will now reconvene in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Subchapter D and E. No action was taken in closed session. Now that we're reconvened into open session, agenda item 17. First is A, consideration to approve the personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements / resignations.
Good evening, Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. At this time, the administration recommends the following applicants for hire in our school district. I'd like to first of all start with Ms. Irma Ramos, educational diagnostician in the special ed department, followed by Mr. Gerald Wynn, English teacher, student guidance and learning center. Additionally, we have the following recommendations as well. We have Ms. Olga Torres, counselor at Del Rio High School. Cynthia Cordova, RN, registered nurse at Buena Vista Elementary. Ms. Luann Viesca, 4th grade teacher at Dr. Fermin Calderon Elementary. And Sherman Ketnig, for 3rd grade teacher at Ruben Chavita Elementary. Additionally, we have 2 assistant principal interns that we'd like to recommend this evening to our Board of Trustees. The first one is Mr. Rick Maldonado, assistant principal intern at Dr. Lonnie Green Elementary. Second would be our assistant principal intern, Mr. Ricardo Pettis at Dr. Fermin Calderon. In the case of our 2 interns that we're recommending this evening, they would be considered an intern for the spring or fall semester 2013, with the understanding that they complete all requirements per the university or the entity of their choosing for a probationary certificate and completion of the PDAS certification requirements. If those 2 things are attained in the fall and they are eligible for a probationary certificate in the spring of 2014, we will then convert these 2 positions to that of an assistant principal at each of these schools for these 2 individuals. Again, that's Mr. Rick Maldonado and Mr. Ricardo Pettis. Those are the recommendations I have, Mr. Garabedian, this evening.
Okay, we've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Chavita has motioned. Is there a second? Ms. Lozano has second. All in favor by a show of hands? It's unanimous. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Yes, sir. This next item is a consideration to approve the principal at Lamar Elementary. At this time, the administration proudly recommends Ms. Maribel Flores as our new principal at Lamar Elementary School.
For the recommendation, I so move to accept. Is there a second?
I second that.
Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1. 6, 1. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 18. Superintendent's report. A, update of district's instructional improvement efforts.
Mr. Garabedian?
Oh, did we miss something?
We did. Consideration to approve the salary adjustments, if I may?
Yes, go back to, that takes us back to B, correct?
Yes, sir.
Under the previous agenda item. Go ahead.
Mr. Garabedian, Dr. Rios, members of the board. At this time, the administration respectively recommends the salary adjustments be approved as presented to you this evening in closed executive session.
For the recommendation, is there a motion to accept? Ms. Lozano has motioned. Is there a second? Mr. Overfelt is second. All in favor by a show of hands? Unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. Now, agenda item 18, superintendent's report, update on district's instructional improvement efforts. Dr. Carlos Rios.
Mr. Garabedian, members of the board, over the last 3 weeks that our kids have been in school, our teachers have been implementing the district-led reform, which is called the planning protocol, beginning with the end in mind. As stated earlier, the campus performance objectives seek not only to increase the number of students that are meeting the standard, but taking the students that are meeting the standard and bringing them to the next highest level. The planning protocol was designed exactly to meet those objectives. There's three ends to the planning protocol. One is to make sure that what needs to be taught is taught, and that's addressed in the steps. The next thing is to create those moments of critical thinking, which we know will take students that are already passing and bring them to the next higher level, and to provide continuous job-embedded staff development. That has been the goal of the planning protocol. Now, to fully implement it, we're asking our teachers to plan every single day together in a manner that's consistent and that's led by the district. Now, the reason I'm bringing this today is to clarify some issues for the board and to make sure that I fully articulate for the board as well for anybody that might be viewing the process. This is an instructional process district-wide. It encompasses every classroom in our district. It's district-led reform, and it's huge. But the outcomes are also going to be tremendously favorable for the district. But I want to be clear that this definitely moves everyone's cheese. It makes everybody look at things differently. And that type of change is difficult. Now, over the last couple of weeks, this is where we've reached out to the different entities. First, I visited with TSTA, a teacher organization, because we had provided a planning period during the teacher workday. Our policy is clear that it needs to be during the instructional day when teachers are in session. TSTA had been talking to some of our teachers. I reached out to TSTA and I said, hey, we came across this policy and obviously we need to change it. I found out about it a couple days ago. We've made the change. It's corrected. TSTA was pleased. And they thanked us for being proactive. The next thing I did is that I reached out to all the teachers at the elementary level and I asked that every campus provide me 2 representatives so that they can share with us how they thought the planning protocol could be better implemented. I was clear that our flexibility didn't mean a lack of focus. We're not doing away with the planning protocol, but we definitely want everybody's input on how to improve the implementation. So I met with a group of teachers. They were incredibly supportive of their fellow teachers and also supportive of the need for the reform. And I asked that I would bring them back after we made some changes so that they would again give us feedback. The next thing I did is that I visited with the leaders of the other teacher organizations and I asked them to come meet with me so that we could schedule some days that I could meet with them at least quarterly, each independent organization, and they could give us feedback on what issues they thought the teachers may have so that we can be proactive and address these ahead of time. The last thing that I did is that I scheduled meetings with the faculties of each campus so that I can come and bring a couple staff members and directly hear any concerns that the teachers may have that maybe were not articulated when we had the brainstorming meeting with the 14 teachers and 2 representatives. So really in summary, what I'm sharing with y'all is just a reminder that this district-led instructional reform, it's a pretty big thing. It involves every classroom in the district, and it seeks to fully reach the objectives that are stated in the campus and district performance objectives. It's all research-based. None of it is based on the whims of any one individual rather than on proven research methods. It does take a while to fully implement. There is an adjustment. And by obtaining teacher feedback, it can inform and guide that adjustment. I want to be very flexible on this. Hear from as many people as we can. Make the process better for our students. But the flexibility should not indicate a lack of focus. We have the end in mind. We know where we need to take our district so that it can better improve our entire community. And that's what we're seeking to do. I will inform the board of the meetings that we have with the faculty so that if y'all would like to participate in the audience and hear what teachers are saying, you can. I am very pleased with the process so far with the implementation, but I know that it is a long road because it seeks to change everyone and everything we're doing for the better. I'm not gonna ask teachers to work any longer than they've worked in the past. I'm just gonna ask them to work differently so that we can reach the goals that have been stated. If there are any questions, I'd would love to share a response, but I just want to summarize it that way. It's a big thing we're doing. It's a process. I'm gonna be as inclusive as I can with everyone's opinion. I just invite people to talk to the principals, talk to the chief instructional officer, and talk to myself so that we can all be informed on how to improve the process. It's pretty big. If it's something that somebody already knew how to do, either A, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in, or B, there'd be somebody else leading this movement. Mr. Gabrini?
Comments? Discussion? Ms. Lozano?
I have a comment, Dr. Rios. Transformational leadership takes a lot of courage, and it does take time. So I appreciate your efforts, and I think what will make it easier is definitely keeping those lines of communication open. And I thank you for reaching out to the teachers in the various groups that you have. I think that really shows a commitment to what you're trying to do, and also appreciation for those entities. I just wanted to say thank you.
Other questions, comments on this side of the board? Well, I think it's very clear what Dr. Rios stated. There is a bigger picture for the past 16 months. I think the board has showed a strong commitment to curriculum instruction. We saw that tonight in a very animated, very in-depth conversation about where we're going and where we need to go. Protocol is administrative, the administrative team's catalyst for getting us there. A few bumps in the road have occurred, but that matter was addressed and is resolved, and I'm confident that things are headed in the right direction. It's certainly the direction we have to move in. So I also say thank you to Dr. Rios for the work he and his instructional team are doing, and especially the teachers. There are several teachers on this board, and we think about them and we hear when there are concerns. And I know the board brought up some things, and things are working out, so that's important. The teachers are going to push us ever forward. And that planning protocol, difficult that it may be in some instances, it's one of those things that has got to occur. There's no further discussion. That brings us to agenda item 19. No further business before this board. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Overfelt has motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Mr. Chavita has second. All in favor by a show of hands. Unanimous motion carries.